At the heart of the city, hidden behind iron gates and a winding path of silver stone, the Ambrose estate stands like a cathedral of opulence. Its chandeliers cast golden halos across towering ceilings. Waiters in tuxedos glide between guests, like shadows with silver trays. Crystal glasses chime in the air, and somewhere, a string quartet plays a song no one listens to, only feels. The air smells of old money and newer secrets. Dresses rustle like whispered rumors, and among the polished shoes and velvet heels, down on the marble floor, a different rhythm unfolds, one unnoticed, one bent in silence. Alina moves on her knees, cloth in hand, tracing circles into cold stone. She wears grain, not just her uniform, but the color of her presence. She blends into the background, deliberately, quietly. No one speaks to her. Number one sees her. She is part of the estate, as much as the columns and candlelight dot above her. Laughter dances, champagne flows. The lives of the powerful unfold in layers, fashioned with careful words and curated smiles. But below, her world is made of stains, of silence, of the quiet ache of hours that pass without acknowledgement. She dips the cloth again into the bucket. Water ripples, distorting her reflection. Briefly, she stares, and just as quickly, she looks away. There's a whisper through the hall. The host has arrived. Cassian, Drake billionaire, philanthropist, a man wrapped in legend. His presence changes the temperature of the room. People straighten, smiles sharpen, cameras flash, and still, Alina scrubs. But then, by accident or fate, their eyes meet. Just a second, maybe less. He's standing by the grand staircase, surrounded by admiration, bathed in light. She's crouched by the base of a column, half in shadow. Yet, in that passing glance, something shifts, something ancient and unspoken. His brow furrows, a flicker of recognition. But then someone touches his arm, and he turns away. And Alina, she presses the cloth harder against the floor. Her jaw tightens. Some stains don't come out. She mutters softly. So quietly the words dissolve into the music. She moves to another tile, a darker one, as if the past could be erased by effort alone. As if, buried beneath the gloss and glamour, there was something else, something she needed to keep hidden. Above her, the world spins on. A champagne tower wobbles. A guest stumbles through a toast. A woman laughs too loudly, her diamonds catching every shard of light. But Alina remains still. She is the ghost of the Gala, the forgotten heartbeat in a place that pretends to be alive. And yet there's something behind her calm. A storm, unspoken dot, something she didn't come to clean, but to reveal. Not now, not yet. For now, she blends back into the walls. The violins rise, the crowd sways, and the invisible woman disappears into her work once more, hands steady, eyes lowered. But inside, something is beginning to stir, something she can't scrub away. Not this time, not tonight. The night deepens at Ambrose Estate. Lights glow warmer now, softened by wine and conversation. Velvet curtains sway gently in the breeze of unseen vents, and laughter echoes from gilded corners. Outside, the moon casts silver across the windows. Inside, the light is golden, carefully curated to flatter the rich and powerful, to make everything look softer than it is. Cassian Drake stands at the center of it all, yet feels slightly removed, as though watching from behind glass. He nods, he smiles, he shakes hands, but something in his chest has begun to hum quietly, insistently. It began earlier, a flicker, a moment that shouldn't matter. A woman on her knees, scrubbing marble, but her face ... Now, he searches without admitting it to himself. Across the ballroom, past the servers, beyond the applause for a violin solo, no one is truly listening to his eyes scan. And then, he finds her ... not on the floor this time, not cleaning. She stands half hidden in the shadow of a pillar, watching him. Their eyes meet ... not by accident. This time, it lingers, a glance too long. Her face is still and unreadable, but her gaze burns with something he cannot name. Memory, anger, recognition. Cassian tilts his head slightly. There's something haunting about her, like a dream he forgot waking up from. He takes a step forward, but a hand curls. Around his arm, Isabella, his fiancée, flawless, poised, dressed in ivory silk that clings like perfection. She leans in with a smile that doesn't reach her eyes. "Who's she?" Isabella asks, her voice sweet but sharp. Cassian blinks. "Who?" But Isabella's already seen. Alina is gone from her corner, like a shadow that moves where no one's looking. Still, Cassian can't shake the feeling. Something is off. Familiar, the way her eyes held him, the way his name felt strange on her lips. In his mind, though she hadn't spoken it, he moves through the corridors now, away from the lights. His steps echo in the quiet. He tells himself he's just clearing his head, but his feet know where they're going before he does. Down the hall, past the old oil portraits, through the velvet hush of wealth, then a shape ahead, Alina standing alone near the gallery window. City lights beyond her frame her like a painting lost in the wrong museum. Cassian approaches slowly, uncertain. She doesn't turn. She doesn't move, but she speaks. Her voice is soft, measured, and cutting through him like cold water. Do you believe in fate, Mr. Drake? He freezes. It's not the question that unsettles him. It's the way she says his name, not as a stranger, as someone who once knew it intimately. She finally turns to look at him, and the storm behind her gaze is unmistakable now. She clutches something in her pocket tightly, as though holding on to the only thing keeping her grounded. A paper, a token, a memory. He doesn't know, but it matters. She matters. And suddenly, the music from the ballroom sounds distant. The people, the lights, the legacy, they all blur. In this quiet hallway, it's just the two of them, and the heavy weight of what's unspoken. Cassian tries to speak, but no words come, and before he can ask her name, she turns again and walks away, not rushed, not afraid, as if she knows he'll follow eventually, as if fate already decided he would. The night wears on, deeper and thicker now. The air in the Ambrose estate grows syrupy with perfume and expectation. Music still flows, but softer now, more background than melody. The crowd has loosened, smiles wider, posture relaxed, laughter edged with wine. In the center of it all, beneath a towering glass dome, stands the desert table, a glittering spectacle of excess. Sugared petals, sculpted chocolate, golden, forks untouched, and just beyond the shimmer and sparkle, in the blind spot where no one looks, she appears. Alina. She moves like breath, quiet, nearly invisible. No cleaning rag in her hand tonight, no mop bucket trailing behind her, just one envelope clutched tight against her chest, as though it were a piece of her heart. She stands there for a moment, frozen. The chandeliers above flicker, as if the building itself holds its breath. Then, slowly, carefully, she slips the envelope beneath the crystal centerpiece, its base dripping with condensation. Unaware, it now sits above a truth decades in the making. The envelope is plain, no name on the outside, no instructions, but inside, a birth certificate, yellowed by time, faded photographs too, maybe 3 corners curled, faces half lost to age, but unmistakable to those who know what to look for, and a single sheet of lined paper, torn from a notebook, words scrawled in hurried ink, trembling at the edges. You deserve to know. That's all it says. No accusations, no explanations, just that, the softest truth, pressed between fragile pages. Alina steps back, her hands lingering for just a moment, not to adjust anything, not to reconsider, but to feel it, the weight of what she's done, what she's finally released. The room continues without her. Waiters pass with silver trays. A guest laughs too loudly over a joke she won't remember. Someone spills champagne. No one notices the envelope or the woman who left it. But Elena's world shifts. She walks away, not with the strength of certainty, but the trembling of a choice long postponed. Her shoulders curve inward, like she's trying to hold herself together. Each step echoes, louder in her ears than in the hallway. Her vision blurs not from tears, but from memory, because she remembers everything. The night that never faded, the choice she made in silence, the years of wondering if he would ever know. And now, he will. Eventually. Because secrets don't stay buried forever. Not when they burn this hot. Outside, the wind presses against the windows. The world beyond, the estate feels far away. But in Elena's chest, a quiet war ends. She gave the truth a home, let it sit, quietly, beneath silver and glass and sugar. Not with the aim to ruin, but to reveal, to remind a man who forgot, or maybe never knew at all, that she doesn't wait to see him find it. She doesn't need to. Some moments are meant to be unseen. Some stories unfold only after the leaving, and as she disappears once more into the back corridors, her figure swallowed by silence, a tremor runs down her spine. Not fear, Not regret, relief, and something else, something almost like grief, because the moment she placed that envelope, the past stopped belonging only to her. Now it's his too. That night transforms. What was once a gathering becomes a spectacle. The Ambrose estate, already a palace of glass and gold, now breathes mystery. Shadows stretch longer, candles burn lower, the music changes slower now, dipped in minor chords. It is the masquerade. Silken masks hide familiar faces, velvet gloves conceal intent, and laughter rings out in strange, hollow echoes, like memory trapped in a ballroom. Alina walks among them, but not as herself. Tonight, she wears a gown borrowed from another life, deep green, quiet in its elegance, and a mask of black lace that hides everything but her eyes. She is not here to clean. She's here to witness, to see the moment when the truth she released finally finds the man it belongs to. She moves through the crowd like mist, a phantom, a forgotten name standing shoulder to shoulder with the city's elite. No one stops her, no one questions, because masks erase class. They blur the line between belonging and intrusion, and tonight she belongs just enough to disappear. Drake stands near the edge of the grand hall, wine untouched in his hand, his jaw tight, his expression distant. Someone handed him the envelope just minutes ago. It was left for you, sir, near the table. He opened it without urgency, but the contents shattered the moment. Paper yellowed with time, photos soft at the corners, a note, handwritten and unbearably still. You deserve to know. He reads the words twice, then a third time. His hands begin to tremble. The crowd fades, the music dulls, the edges of his world narrow. For a moment, the mask he wears, not the one on his face, but the one that power and money built over years, slips. He looks up, scans the ballroom. Faces flash past him, laughing, dancing, sipping. He sees feathers, jewels, painted lips, but none of them matter. Then he sees her. Stillness in motion, a woman in emerald green, watching him from across the floor, her eyes half hidden, fully known. He doesn't know how he knows, but he knows everything. Inside him draws to a point, his grip tightens on the envelope. She doesn't look away, neither does he. Between them, distance, the weight of time, the silent history of a life not lived. But in that glance, something passes, recognition not of face, but of consequence. She turns first. Not fast, not afraid. She melts back into the crowd, vanishing into the rhythm of silk and music. Cassian steps forward, then stops, because suddenly, he's unsure of what he wants to say, of what he's allowed to feel, of what comes next now that the past has touched his hand. The envelope, still open, flutters slightly in his fingers. A birth certificate, a name he doesn't know, but one that belongs to him. A child, a truth buried in silence, now brought into the light, and the woman who carried it, gone again. He stands there, heartbeat thick in his throat, as masked faces spin past him, and for the first time in years, Cassian Drake feels exposed, not by scandal, but by truth. Truth that wore a mask to enter his world, and may never wear one again. The music fades behind him. Cassian steps away from the masquerade, away from the clinking glasses, the glittering laughter, the safety of spectacle, down a narrow corridor lined with oil portraits and whispered history. He moves with purpose, the envelope still tucked in his hand like a wound that won't clot. He doesn't know why he follows her, only that he must thought she left the ballroom moments ago, but her presence lingers like perfume, like memory. Ahead, a door stands ajar. Light spills out softly, gold and warm, pooling across the polished floor like something sacred. He pushes it open. The piano room, silent, timeless, walls of dark wood. A single grand piano at the center, curved like a sleeping creature. Dust motes dance in the light from the stained glass window above. And there she is, Alina, standing at the piano's edge, one gloved hand resting gently on the lid. She doesn't turn, she doesn't need to. He knows. He closes the door behind him, and the world seals off, as if the estate itself holds its breath for what's about to be said. Tension thickens the air. The room feels too small for the distance between them, and when he speaks, his voice is quiet, but sharp enough to cut the silence. Who are you? She turns slowly. Her mask is still on, but her voice low, steady, pain wrapped in restraint. Someone you left behind. The words don't shout, they don't accuse, but they strike something deep in him, a place he thought had long gone numb. Searches her face, stillness, strength, and something else. Something he cannot name, but somehow feels familiar. A ghost he forgot to grieve. You ... Double quotes he starts. But the sentence goes nowhere, because realization is not a lightning strike. It's a slow unraveling, and in this moment, threads begin to loosen. Alina steps closer, barely, and her voice softens, not because it has lost power, but because it no longer needs volume to carry weight. You were 23, ambitious, restless, drunk on dreams and charm. And I was the quiet girl who loved music more than mirrors. Cassian stares at her, breath shallow. A single image returns to him, a university piano room, dimly lit, a girl sitting at the keys, playing something mournful, her back to him, her hair in a loose braid, her silence louder than applause. Alina, that girl. This woman. He looks down at the envelope in his hand, as if seeing it for the first time. The note, the birth certificate, the photographs, everything begins to rearrange. What do you want from me? He asks. The question is honest, not defensive, not cruel, just raw. Alina exhales slowly, and for a moment, she looks tired, not from the night, but from the years. All I wanted was to give you the truth. I didn't come to ruin you. She looks at him then, fully. The mask means nothing now. Her eyes are bare. You deserve to know, she repeats, echoing the words in her letter. Silence stretches heavy, necessary. He walks to the piano and sets the envelope down gently on its surface, like an offering. His hand rests there. Still, he doesn't look at her, because he can't yet, because he's afraid that once he does, he won't be able to unsee what he now knows. The woman he forgot, the son he never met, the version of himself he abandoned. Behind them, the faint echo of the Gala leaks through the walls, distant, unimportant. This room in its silence holds more noise than anything out there, and as they stand on opposite sides of the piano, a truth hums in the space between them, soft, tragic, and impossible to ignore. They are no longer strangers, and they will never be again. Rain has a way of erasing the edges of the world, turning everything into smudged silhouettes and blurred reflections. That night, 15 years ago, the university campus looked like a painting someone had cried over. Street lamps glowed in halos. Puddles mirrored the flicker of passing cars. Music thumped faintly from the old red brick building, where the party was in full swing. But the real story was happening outside. Cassian remembered arriving late, half-drenched, his jacket useless against the downpour. He never cared for parties, but his roommate had dragged him there, promising just one drink. The moment he stepped inside, the heat and noise swallowed him whole. The air thick with perfume, sweat, and the low hum of voices competing with the bass-heavy music. And then he saw her. Alina was sitting on the windowsill in the far corner, her back to the rain-streaked glass, the faintest smile playing on her lips, as if she were listening to a joke only she understood. She wasn't the most striking girl in the room, at least not in the way others measured beauty, but there was something about her, a softness, a depth, the kind of presence that pulled the air around her into stillness. Their eyes met once, and it was like a thread had been thrown between them. He walked over. She didn't look away. The conversation started easily, almost awkwardly, names, majors, where they were from, but soon it drifted into the kind of territory strangers rarely reach so quickly. She spoke about constellations, about how she used to climb onto her roof as a child and trace shapes in the stars until her mother called her inside. Cassian told her about a book he'd read, about how some stars burned out millions of years ago, yet still shone in our sky, ghosts of light traveling across time. She'd looked at him then, her eyes warm and unguarded, and whispered, "So, even the dead can be beautiful." Hours slipped by. The party blurred into background noise. When they finally stepped outside, the rain had grown heavier. She laughed as it soaked through her hair, tilting her face up to the sky. They ran across the quad, splashing through puddles, breathless from nothing but the weightless joy of the moment. On the stone steps of the library, with water dripping from their clothes, she asked him a question, not with the casual tone of small talk, but with the quiet urgency of someone who knows a moment might matter. "Will you be here next week?" He hesitated, not because he didn't want to be, but because something in his life was already pulling him elsewhere. "I'll try," he said. But she'd smiled, as if she'd already read the truth in him. That night, before they parted, she pressed something into his hand, a folded piece of paper, her handwriting looping across it. "So you won't forget," she said. He didn't forget. Not exactly. But life has a way of burying things under the weight of necessity. He left for an internship 2 days later. 1 week became 2. 2 became a month. And then he simply didn't go back. The paper with her number stayed in his wallet for years, until one day it was gone, misplaced in some move, discarded with the debris of a life always in motion. What he never knew, what she never told him, was what happened. After that night, she'd waited for him, not once, but 3 times. The first week, in the rain. The second, under clear skies. The third, under clouds so heavy the air felt like it would break. Each time, she had rehearsed what she would say if he came. Each time, she had left with her words unspoken. And then, on the 4th week, something changed. Something she carried alone. Something that tied her to that night in a way he could not imagine. When the rain came again, she stood at the same spot where they had last spoken. The street lamp above her flickered. The world smelled of wet stone and faint electricity. And though she would never admit it, she whispered his name into the storm, as if the wind might deliver it to him. But Cassian wasn't there. He never knew the sound of her voice in that moment, or the way her eyes searched the shadows as if they might rearrange into him. Years passed, seasons turned, and yet, for Alina, the memory remained sharp. The night it rained, the boy with the ghostlight words, and the promise he didn't keep. In the present, as she stood before him again in the old house, the weight of those years pressed between them. Her silence wasn't emptiness. It was a story she had been carrying alone for half her life. A story he had once been a part of. A story he had left unfinished. The music faltered first. Somewhere across the ballroom, a violinist's bow scraped a wrong note, like a sudden crack in glass. The sound rippled through the air, and the conversations, the endless clink of champagne glasses and polite laughter, began to stutter. Cassian barely heard any of it. He was still standing in the doorway of the piano room, the echo of last words lodged in his chest like shrapnel. "He's yours." The syllables hung there, heavy and irreversible, louder than the murmur of the Gala beyond. Cassian's vision swam for a second, and he had to reach out, fingers brushing the edge of the polished grand piano, to keep himself steady. His mind tried to form questions, but they dissolved before they could reach his lips. "Son." His voice cracked on the word. Alina didn't move closer. Her hands were clasped in front of her, as though holding herself together took everything she had. She simply nodded once, and in the dim golden light spilling from the chandelier, Cassian saw it, the years of exhaustion carved into her face, the kind that came from carrying a secret that had been too heavy for too long. "He was born the spring after you left," she said softly. "In a hospital room where I signed every paper alone. I sent no letters. I didn't even try to find you." She swallowed, her voice tightening. "You didn't deserve to know him back then." Cassian's knees threatened to give way, his breath hitching painfully. A part of him, some wounded, defensive instinct, wanted to ask why she didn't tell him, but another, deeper part, knew the answer already. He had walked away. He had left her with nothing but silence and rain. "What's his name?" he asked, almost afraid to hear it. For the first time, Elena's eyes faltered. "I didn't name him after you," she said. "I couldn't. He has my surname." She hesitated. "I called him Leo." Leo. The name landed with a strange, sharp ache. A life he had never touched. 15 years of birthdays, of first steps, of scraped knees and bedtime stories, all without him. Cassian's mouth opened, but before he could speak, the air behind them shifted. A rush of cold swept into the room, and then Cassian. The voice was ice. Isabella stood in the doorway, her satin gown catching the light from the chandelier, her diamond earrings swinging like pendulums. But her eyes, her perfectly painted eyes, were locked on him with something between fury and disbelief. She had heard. Her gaze flicked to Alina, and for a heartbeat, the three of them were bound together in a tense, suffocating triangle. "Is this some kind of joke?" Isabella's voice sliced through the stillness, pitched low enough that the nearest guests outside the room couldn't hear yet. "Tell me, I didn't just hear you admit to having a child with..." Her hand made a vague, cutting gesture toward Alina. "It's not a joke," Alina said before Cassian could speak. Her voice was steady now, almost defiant. "It's the truth." The words seemed to echo, though the room was silent. From somewhere beyond the doorway, the sounds of the Gala, clinking glasses, footsteps, A burst of laughter seemed impossibly far away. Cassian could feel the eyes now. Not many yet, but enough. The nearest guests had noticed Isabella's rigid stance, the tension in her shoulders, the way her hand gripped the frame of the door. And then the music stopped entirely. The pianist, who had been playing in the corner of the ballroom, must have sensed the shift. Without the buffer of melody, the stillness became unbearable. It crept across the room like a slow, rolling fog. Cassian tried to speak. "Isabella, but she cut him off with a sharp, almost disbelieving laugh. 15 years, Cassian. 15 years, and this is the first I'm hearing about a bastard son." Alina flinched, but she didn't look away. The hush spread further. People began drifting closer, subtle at first. A curious glance here, a tilt of the head there, until the open doorway to the piano room became a silent stage. Cassian could feel their stares pressing in, heavy and unrelenting. "Alina," he began, but his voice felt foreign, fragile. She looked at him with something that wasn't quite pity and wasn't quite anger. "I didn't come here to ruin you, Cassian, but I won't hide him anymore." The sentence landed with finality. Isabella's mouth tightened, her grip on the doorframe whitening her knuckles. "This isn't over," she said coldly, before stepping back, not in retreat, but in preparation. She was already calculating the damage. Cassian stood there, caught between the woman he had once loved and the woman who now wore his ring, the weight of 15 lost years pressing on his chest. In that moment, the grandeur of the gala, the glittering chandeliers, the watching eyes, all of it blurred into nothing. Only one thing remained sharp. Somewhere out there, in a world that suddenly felt too big, was a boy named Leo. And he was his son. By morning, the story is everywhere, not whispered, not speculated, screamed in bold, merciless fonts. Cassian Drake has secret love child, who is Alina Vale, the billionaire and the woman from his past. Every newsstand, every television, every glowing phone screen. His name isn't just trending, it's bleeding across the internet like an open wound. Cassian sits in his penthouse, the skyline outside blurred by rain, the headlines flashing on a muted TV. His phone hasn't stopped ringing. His PR team leaves frantic voicemails. Investors are demanding answers. Stock prices are sliding, the numbers falling like shards of glass. And through it all, one voice plays in his head, Elena's whisper from last night. "He's yours." He doesn't remember sitting down, doesn't remember loosening his tie, just remembers the weight in his chest, heavy, immovable. By noon, it's not just a scandal, it's a feeding frenzy. Paparazzi crowd the lobby of his building, flashes bursting like lightning. Every time the elevator opens, one shouts questions, another yells accusations. Cassian doesn't answer a single one. When he reaches the office, the air is colder. Conversations halt when he walks by. His most loyal board members won't meet his eyes. His assistant can't keep her hands from shaking as she passes him a folder marked Crisis Management. He doesn't open it. That night, Isabella is gone. Her side of the closet, empty. The scent of her perfume lingers faintly in the bedroom, as if mocking him. She hasn't left a note, just a single envelope addressed to his lawyer. And Elena gone, no forwarding address, no trace. Her hotel room cleared before sunrise. The front desk says she paid in cash. The cameras in the hallway mysteriously stopped recording the night before. It's as if she walked out of the world and took the air with her. Cassian stands by the window, city lights glittering below, and feels the kind of silence that doesn't just fill a room, it consumes it. In the reflection of the glass, he sees himself, the man the headlines have built into a villain, the man who once thought his past was buried deep enough to never resurface. But now, the past is everywhere, and it has teeth. The morning after the headlines, Cassian didn't show up at the office. His assistant called, his board members sent urgent messages, but he ignored them all. By noon, he was already deep in the back streets of the city places he hadn't set foot in for over a decade. His driver tried to keep up, but Cassian waved him off. This wasn't business, this was penance. He started with the obvious, old acquaintances, former employees, people who might have seen Alina in the years since. Most shook their heads, some offered pitying looks, others closed their doors without a word. By the third day, his suit jacket was wrinkled, his tie missing, his eyes red from lack of sleep. The city felt colder than he remembered, and every unfamiliar face made his chest ache. He revisited the Gala hall, speaking with staff who'd worked that night. She left in a hurry, the event manager told him, and she wasn't alone. A boy, maybe 7 or 8, held her hand. The image punched through him like a knife. A son, his son. By the 5th day, Cassian stopped going home altogether. He checked into a small corner hotel under a fake name. At night, he lay awake, haunted by the look in Elena's eyes when she'd whispered, "He's yours." The weight of every missed year pressed down like an ocean on his chest. One evening, a lead brought him back to Ambrose, the historic building where the gala had been held. It was nearly midnight, the halls echoing with the hum of ancient pipes. A security guard, after a brief bribe, let him inside. Cassian found himself wandering toward the service wing, where the janitor's quarters were tucked away. The smell of cleaning supplies lingered faintly in the air. He opened the first door, empty. The second, just an old mop and bucket. The third door creaked louder than the rest. Inside, the small, cramped room was stripped bare, as if whoever had been there left in a hurry. But something caught his eye, a faded metal locker standing half open. Inside, taped to the door with peeling masking tape, was a single sheet of paper. A child's drawing, 2 stick figures holding hands. The taller one wore a suit, with a crooked smile. The smaller one had messy hair, a bright yellow sun drawn above them. In a shaky, uneven scrawl at the bottom, it read, "To Daddy." Cassian's throat tightened. He reached out, his hand trembling as he touched the paper. The edges were worn, as if it had been folded and unfolded many times. It was the only thing left in the room, the only trace of them. He stood there for a long time, the silence pressing in. The city outside kept moving, cars passing, lives continuing. But for Cassian, the world had narrowed to this single drawing. It wasn't just a clue, it was a plea. When he finally left Ambrose, the night air hit him like a slap. He tucked the drawing carefully into his coat pocket, the paper crinkling softly with every step. He didn't know where they'd gone, but he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He wasn't going to stop until he found them. The rain had stopped an hour ago, but the streets still glistened under the late afternoon sun. Cassian's shoes left small, damp prints on the cracked pavement as he walked past shuttered shops and peeling signs. The town looked forgotten, the kind of place people passed through on the way to somewhere better. A rusted pickup rolled by, its engine coughing, and the smell of fried oil drifted from the corner. He spotted the diner before he reached it, a squat, single-story building with chipped red paint, a faded neon sign that blinked EAT in uneven pulses, and a squeaky door that seemed to complain each time someone entered. The windows were streaked, and the booths inside sat half-empty. Somewhere in the background, a jukebox hummed faintly. Caught between songs, she was there. Alina stood at the far end, her back to him, wiping down a table with slow, practiced motions. Her hair was shorter than he remembered, tucked behind her ears, strands curling from the humidity. She wore a plain blue apron over a pale shirt, sleeves rolled up to her elbows. There was a slump to her shoulders, the quiet fatigue of someone who had learned to live without expecting much. Cassian paused just inside the doorway. He didn't announce himself. For a few moments, he simply watched her move, cloth in hand, the way she reached for the salt shaker to wipe underneath it, how she straightened the sugar packets without thinking. He remembered those hands, not tired and calloused, but quick, clever, warm. When she finally noticed him, there was no gasp of recognition, no sudden collapse into old feelings. She just looked at him for a second, then returned to wiping the table. He crossed the room. "You're a long way from the city," he said. "Not far enough," she replied without looking up. There was no malice in her voice, not yet, just a statement of fact. He slid into the booth across from where she was working, and she finally straightened, leaning her weight on one hip. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "I know." Her gaze lingered on him for a beat longer than was comfortable. Then she moved to the next table, turning her back again. The clink of cutlery in the kitchen filled the silence. "I didn't come for forgiveness," Cassian said. Her shoulders tensed. She stopped wiping, hand frozen on the table's edge. "Good," she replied, still not facing him. "You won't get it." He exhaled slowly. "I'm not asking." "Then why are you here?" The question hung between them, heavier than it should have been. A waitress in her 20s passed by, refilling a coffee cup for the trucker at the counter, giving Cassian a quick, curious glance before moving on. "I just wanted to see you," he said. She turned, then, finally meeting his eyes. They were darker now. The brightness he remembered dulled, but not extinguished. "You saw me," she said flatly. Now what? Cassian searched for something that wouldn't sound hollow. You're still... She gave a short, humorless laugh. No, I'm what's left. The door opened behind him and a couple came in, shaking rain from their jackets. The spell of their conversation broke for a moment as Alina moved toward them, leading them to a booth, her voice suddenly lighter, the practiced politeness of someone paid to be kind. Cassian watched her smile at strangers and realized she hadn't smiled at him once. When she returned, she didn't stop at his booth. She walked past, toward the counter, and began stacking mugs. He followed her. Alina, don't, she said, not turning around. I just need a few minutes. You had years, Cassian. You used them. She set a mug down a little too hard, the sound sharp in the air. You don't get to walk back in and pretend the past is just waiting for you. I'm not pretending, he said. I know what I did. I know what I didn't do. Finally, she faced him again, hands gripping the counter's edge. You think that matters to me now? You think I lie awake, wishing you'd done things differently? I don't. I got used to the silence. I made peace with it. He studied her face, searching for cracks. There were none. She was steady, resolute, even in her exhaustion. I'm glad you're alive, he said quietly. For a moment, something flickered in her eyes, not softness, exactly, but recognition. She stepped back, wiping her hands on her apron. Finish your coffee, she said, then go. Cassian nodded. He didn't order coffee, didn't sit back down. He just stood there for a moment longer, memorizing her in this place, the neon light catching on her hair, the smell of burnt toast, the muted chatter of strangers. And then he left. Outside, the rain had started again, fine and steady. He walked back to his car, each step heavier than the last dot behind him. The diner door swung shut. Cassian stood at the threshold of the narrow hallway, his hand hesitating on the wooden frame. The faint creak of a floorboard betrayed his presence before Alina even looked up from the counter. She didn't speak, just gave the smallest nod toward the back room. His steps were slow, almost reverent, as if the air itself had grown heavy with the weight of the moment. Inside, the room smelled faintly of paper and something citrus. A desk was pushed against the wall, littered with books, pencils, and a single chessboard mid-game. The boy sat there, hunched slightly, studying the board with the kind of concentration Cassian had seen in mirrors during his younger years. His hair was dark, a little too long, curling near the edges, and when the boy finally lifted his gaze, Cassian froze. The eyes, his eyes, they were the same deep brown, flecked with something unreadable, cautious but curious. Neither spoke at first. The silence stretched, not awkward, but thick, like both were afraid words might shatter something fragile. Noah Cassian's voice was softer than he intended. The boy gave a small nod. You're Cassian. The name landed with an unfamiliar weight. Not Dad, not Father, just Cassian. He forced a small smile. Yeah, that's me. Noah's gaze drifted to the chessboard. Do you play chess? Cassian chuckled lightly, though it sounded almost self-conscious. Not well, he admitted, but I'd like to learn. The boy studied him for a beat, then pointed to the empty chair across from him. You can start by playing white, he said, his tone somewhere between a challenge and an invitation. Cassian sat, every movement deliberate, as if afraid he might spook this boy, who was both a stranger and a mirror of himself. His hands hovered over the pawns before making a move. Noah countered almost instantly. The game began in silence, punctuated only by the soft click of wooden pieces meeting the board. With each move, Cassian felt something shift, not in the game, but in himself. The walls between them didn't crumble, but a door cracked open, just enough for light to slip in. Outside, Alina moved quietly through the diner, but every so often, her eyes flickered toward the back room. She didn't interfere. She just listened to the faint sound of a man and his son beginning something that might one day resemble a bond. When Cassian finally lost his queen in a clumsy move, Noah's lips twitched in the smallest of smiles. Told you I was good, the boy said. Cassian leaned back, grinning despite the sting of defeat. Guess I've got a lot to learn from you. And for the first time in years, Cassian realized he didn't mind learning. The boardroom was a wall of glass and steel, the city skyline sprawling behind Cassian like a silent audience. 12 men and women in tailored suits sat around the long mahogany table, their eyes sharp, their voices colder than the winter light spilling through the windows. This situation, began the chairman, sliding a glossy magazine across the table. Cashin's own photograph stared back at him from the cover. A headline in bold read, Crow Air OR, Hoax. A murmur rippled through the room. It's bad for business, another board member said, her tone clipped. The markets don't respond well to scandal. You've built an image, Cassian, disciplined, untouchable. This child, Cassian, jaw tightened. This child is my son. The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy and unwelcome. Someone scoffed. Another leaned back, adjusting his cufflinks, as though the matter was already beneath them. You need to deny him publicly. The chairman pressed. Release a statement. Say it's a mistake. We'll pay the mother off quietly. Cassian reached into his briefcase without a word. From it, he pulled a thin folder and slid it across the polished table. The board members exchanged wary glances before flipping it open. Inside, neat medical reports bore the irrefutable seal of a genetics lab. DNA results. His voice was calm, but his eyes burned. I won't deny my blood. The silence that followed was jagged. One of the older members leaned forward, lowering his voice as though speaking to a child. You've fought for years to sit in that chair, and now you'd risk everything for sentiment. Cashin's fingers curled against the table. This isn't sentiment, it's truth. And if this empire can't stand on truth, then it's not worth keeping. The tension broke into sharp voices, overlapping arguments, and the metallic scrape of chairs against the floor. Someone muttered about shareholders, another about damage control. The fracture lines in his empire were visible, now, splintering fast, like cracks in glass. But Cassian didn't move, didn't waver. Outside, storm clouds rolled over the city, their reflections swallowing the room in shifting shadows. He'd faced storms before. This one, he would weather for his son. The autumn wind carried the faint scent of rain, rattling the brittle leaves along the narrow street where Elena's small apartment stood. Cassian had been here before, once, weeks ago, when he'd stood outside and convinced himself to walk away. Today, he didn't leave. She opened the door halfway, her eyes cool, her body angled as if to block the entry. The scent of coffee drifted out behind her, mixed with something faintly citrus from the kitchen. You could have called, she said. I thought you'd tell me not to come, he replied, his voice quiet but steady. I would have, she said flatly. A moment passed where neither moved. He caught a glimpse of Noah's school bag by the couch, its zipper half open, a math workbook peeking out. A pang tightened in his chest. Elena, he began carefully, I'm not here to make trouble. I want to understand where I stand. Her hand tightened on the door. Where you stand. You don't get to stand anywhere just because you showed up. I know that, he said, his gaze dropping briefly to the floor. But I'm trying. I want to be in his life. She gave a sharp, bitter laugh. You don't get to waltz in and become his hero. That's not what I'm trying to be. His voice cracked slightly, and he steadied it. I just want to be his father. She leaned against the doorframe, her expression unreadable. You think it's that simple, that a few afternoons at the park, some chess games, maybe a birthday gift or two, and suddenly you're dad. You weren't there when he had the flu for 6 days straight, when he stayed up crying because he didn't understand why the other boys had fathers at their games, and he didn't. Each word felt like a blade. Cassian didn't flinch. He let them cut, because she was right. I know what I missed, he said, his voice low. I know I can't get those years back, but I have now, and if you'll let me, I'll have tomorrow, too. Her eyes softened for the briefest second before hardening again. You talk like you can promise you won't leave, but life doesn't work like that. People break. They choose themselves. You did. The truth of it sat heavy between them. He thought of the boardroom battles, the empire he'd been raised to guard like a fortress, and how easily he had let that fortress dictate his life. He thought of the young woman he'd once loved, standing now like a sentry at the gates of her heart. Noah's voice called from somewhere inside. Mom, who's at the door? Her shoulders tensed. She didn't answer him immediately, took a small step back. I'll go, he said quietly. I didn't come here to make this harder. She studied him for a moment, as if searching for cracks in his resolve. You'll have to prove it, she finally said, day after day. No grand gestures, no speeches, just show up. He nodded. I can do that. She didn't open the door wider, but she also didn't close it in his face. That, he realized, was its own kind of invitation, a sliver, a test. Noah appeared in the hallway behind her, his hair mussed from reading on the couch. His eyes met Cassian's, curious but cautious. "Hey, kid," Cassian said gently. "Hi," Noah replied, his voice uncertain. Elena's gaze flicked between them. "He was just leaving," she told Noah. Cassian gave a faint smile, accepting it. "I'll see you soon," he said. Noah didn't answer, but he didn't look away either. As Cassian walked down the narrow street, the wind carrying the smell of rain followed him. He knew Elena's walls wouldn't come down easily. Maybe they never would. But for the first time, he felt that what lay on the other side was worth every bruise he'd take trying to get there. The call came just after midnight. Elena's voice on the other end was frantic, shaking. "It's Noah. He can't breathe right. I'm taking him to County General." Cassian didn't think. He was already in his car before the call even ended. The roads were slick with rain. The city lights smeared in his windshield, but all he could hear was her voice, the panic beneath the control she always tried to hold. When he reached the hospital, he spotted her immediately. Elena was pacing outside the pediatric wing, hair damp from the downpour, one arm wrapped tightly around herself as if holding her own body together. Her eyes flicked up when she saw him. For a second, she looked like she might tell him to leave, that his presence was unwelcome. But she didn't. She simply stepped aside and let him pass. Noah was in a hospital bed, a small oxygen mask covering his face. His skin looked pale against the white sheets, his chest rising and falling in shallow, quick breaths. Cassian's stomach dropped. He moved to the bedside slowly, afraid that if he touched the boy too suddenly, he might shatter him. His hand hovered before it finally settled on Noah's. "Hey, buddy," he whispered, his voice unsteady. "I'm here now." The boy's eyelids fluttered, but didn't fully open. Cassian felt the smallest squeeze against his palm. That was all it took for the dam inside him to crack. He sat there, unmoving, as the monitors beeped steadily. His free hand came up to his face, pressing hard against his eyes. But it didn't stop the tears. Elena lingered in the doorway, leaning against the frame. She had never seen him like this, raw, stripped of the armor he wore in boardrooms and negotiations. No tailored suit, no commanding presence. Just a man terrified of losing his child. She remembered the years she'd spent, hating him for walking away, for the way his absence had carved a hollow into Noah's life. She'd promised herself that no amount of regret from him would ever be enough. But watching him now, the way he bent forward, forehead resting near Noah's hand, his shoulders shaking, something in her shifted. Hours bled together. Nurses came and went, adjusting for drips and checking vitals. Cassian never left the chair beside the bed. Every so often, he would stand to adjust Noah's blanket, smoothing it over him like it was the only thing keeping the boy safe. At one point, Elena walked in with 2 paper cups of coffee. She placed one beside him without a word. He didn't thank her, but his hand lingered near it for a moment before wrapping back around Noah's. Around 4 in the morning, the doctor came in, his voice calm, his breathing stabilizing. "The medication's working. We'll keep him overnight for observation, but he's going to be fine." Cassian exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for hours. His head dropped, and a sound, something between a laugh and a sob, escaped him. Elena stayed quiet, watching as he brushed a damp strand of hair from Noah's forehead. "You didn't have to come," she said finally, her voice softer than she meant it to be. Cassian looked up at her, his eyes red. "I'll always come." She wanted to argue, to remind him of the years when he hadn't, but the words didn't come. Instead, she nodded faintly and moved closer, standing on the other side of the bed. For the first time in years, they stood there together, not as enemies, not as but as to people who loved the same small boy more than anything else in the world. When dawn broke through the narrow hospital window, it found them both still there, still holding Noah's hands from opposite sides. And for the first time, Elena wasn't entirely sure that her hatred could survive much longer. The rain had started again, a quiet drizzle tapping against the living room windows, blurring the city lights into soft halos. Elena stood near the bookshelf, arms crossed, though not in defiance, more like she was holding herself together. Cassian sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, staring down at his hands as though the words he needed might be written in his palms. For a long time, neither spoke. The only sound was the rain, and somewhere in the apartment, the hum of the refrigerator. Finally, Cassian lifted his head. His eyes were red, not from anger, but from the weight of something that had been festering for years. "I wasn't ready," he said quietly, almost as if speaking to himself first. Back then, I was terrified of being a father, of staying, of you needing me more than I knew how to give. He swallowed, the muscles in his jaw tightening. I thought walking away would hurt less than failing you. Elena's fingers dug lightly into her arms. Her eyes darted toward him for a second, then away again. I was a coward, Cassian continued. His voice broke on the word. I kept telling myself I'd come back when I had it together, but life kept moving, and I let it. I told myself you were better off without me. Elena let out a bitter, shaky breath. And now you've decided that's changed, that you can just walk in here and know. He cut in, his tone firm but not sharp. It's not about walking in and fixing everything. I can't fix what I broke, but I can tell you the truth now, all of it, and live with what you do with it. His voice softened. I'm not that man anymore. I'm not running, not from you, not from him. The words hung between them, heavy and raw. Elena's throat tightened. She hated that part of her wanted to believe him, that it ached to believe him. She thought of Noah in the hospital bed last night. Cassian's head bent low as he whispered something only the boy could hear. The way he had gripped their son's hand, like it was the only anchor left in the world. Her eyes burned. Do you have any idea, she whispered, what it's been like? Watching him grow up and answer questions I didn't know how to answer. Watching him search every crowd, hoping. Her voice broke before she could finish. Cassian's hands were trembling. Now, I know I don't deserve it. Not your forgiveness, not his, but I want to try. For as long as it takes, I'll show you I'm not leaving again. For the first time in the conversation, Elena looked directly at him and didn't look away. His face was lined with exhaustion, but also something else. Something steadier than she remembered. The rain outside grew heavier, as if the sky itself was leaning closer to listen. You hurt me, she said finally. Her voice was low, but it didn't shake. You left me with pieces I didn't know how to put back together. I know, he said, eyes glistening, and I will spend the rest of my life proving I can be here for both of you, even if you never forgive me. Something in her chest shifted just a fraction, but enough for her to notice. She felt the old resentment still there, but it was fraying at the edges, worn thin by the sight of him not defending himself, not making excuses, just standing in the wreckage he'd made. Tears slipped down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. Cassian's voice dropped to almost a whisper. I love you, Elena. I never stopped. I just lost my way. Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, she took a slow breath, feeling the rain's rhythm against the window, the quiet in the space between them. She didn't tell him she forgave him. She didn't even tell him she believed him. But she didn't tell him to leave either. And for now, that was enough. The grand hall glimmers under chandeliers, each crystal catching the light like drops of frozen starlight. Music swells in the background, not loud, but elegant, a gentle murmur beneath the hum of conversation. The air carries the scent of roses and champagne, and the polished marble floor reflects the shimmer of gowns and tuxedos. It has been 1 year, the last time Elena had entered this building. She'd worn the crisp white blouse and dark trousers of staff. She'd moved silently along the edges, invisible in the glittering crowd. Tonight, she is the center of it. The moment she steps into the hall, the soft rustle of emerald silk follows her, a gown that flows like water round her figure, its deep green catching the light with every movement. Her hair is pinned with delicate pearls, her steps measured, assured. On her arm, holding her hand with a boyish smile, is Noah dressed in a miniature suit, his small chest puffed with pride. The crowd notices. Conversations taper off, glasses lower, heads turn. A ripple of surprise and admiration moves through the room, as though a living secret has just stepped into the light. Elena's heart beats in her throat, but she does not falter. For years, she'd entered rooms like this as part of the background. Tonight, every gaze feels like a question. How did she get here? And at the far end of the hall, Cassian stands near the podium, his eyes fixed on her. There's no mistaking the way his shoulders straighten, the way something unguarded flickers across his face. She moves forward slowly, Noah's hand in hers, the emerald gown brushing the marble. A waiter offers her champagne. She shakes, her head with a soft smile. The music swells as she reaches the center of the room, and Cassian steps forward. He doesn't look at the crowd, only at her. When he finally speaks, his voice carries effortlessly, deep and warm, filling the hall without force. To the family, he pauses, his gaze lingering on Elena. then dropping briefly to Noah. I almost lost. The words hang in the air, tender yet heavy. The guests raised their glasses, some smiling, some glancing between them with curiosity. Alina does not raise hers. She simply looks at him, her lips pressed into a quiet line. For the briefest second, she sees not the billionaire host of the gala, not the man who once shattered her, but the one who stayed up all night holding their son's hand, the one who whispered apologies with eyes full of regret. Noah tugs gently at her arm. "Mom," he whispers, "are you happy?" Her eyes soften. She squeezes his hand. "Yes, baby," she says, though her voice trembles just slightly. The music shifts into something slower, richer. Cassian steps down from the dais and walks toward them, every pair of eyes following his movement. He stops in front of her, close enough that she can see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the ones that hadn't been there before. "Alina," he says, quietly, so only she can hear, "you look like everything I never deserved, but always wished for." She doesn't answer. She doesn't step back. Instead, she lets the silence hold them, the hum of the room fading into nothing, the years between them folding into this one moment. Somewhere, in the crowd, applause begins, slow, hesitant, then builds until it fills the hall. Cassian lifts his glass once more, but his eyes never leave hers, and Alina, for the first time in years, lets herself believe that maybe this is the beginning of something new. The night air outside the gala was cold, sharp with the scent of rain. Inside, the chandeliers cast a warm, golden glow over the lingering hum of music and polite conversation. Cassian lingered near the grand staircase, his glass untouched, his eyes scanning the room like a man who had learned to trust nothing, not even the stillness. And then she appeared. Isabella. She stepped into the light, as if she owned it, her heels clicking against the marble floor in slow, deliberate rhythm. Her dress was crimson, a shade that seemed less like celebration and more like a warning. Her hair was perfect, her lips painted in a smirk that carried the weight of something dangerous. The crowd didn't know her. Not anymore. But Cassian did. She stopped a few feet from him, letting her gaze sweep over him, over the room, over the life he now held together. Then, with the kind of voice meant to cut, she said softly, "You've rebuilt beautifully, Cassian. But some cracks never really heal, do they?" He didn't move, didn't blink. "What do you want, Isabella?" Her smile widened, though it never reached her eyes. "What I've always wanted, control. And I have something you don't want anyone to see. New allegations, worse than the last. Names, dates, proof." She leaned in slightly, her perfume heavy, cloying. "All it would take is one leak, and everything you've clawed back, gone." Cassian's jaw tightened. Once, those words would have gutted him. Once, the mere threat would have sent him scrambling to protect himself, to keep the past from swallowing him whole. But not now. He looked her dead in the eye, his voice low. "Even, I've already been broken once. Try me." Something flickered across her face, annoyance, maybe surprise. She straightened, her smirk faltering just enough for him to see the woman beneath the armor. "You think you've won, Cassian, but people like you never really change." He didn't answer. He didn't need to, because in that moment she saw the truth in his eyes. The man standing before her was not the same one she had once dismantled piece by piece. Without another word, she turned on her heel and walked away, the sound of her departure swallowed by the hum of the gala. Cassian stood there, breathing slowly, letting the moment settle. Isabella was gone. Not defeated, perhaps, but gone. The past had tried to claw its way back into the present, but this time it had found no purchase. And for the first time in a long while, Cassian felt something he hadn't dared believe. In finality, the broken ring was no longer a chain. It was just a memory. The rain had just stopped when the car rolled up the long gravel drive. The estate stood quiet, washed in the silver light of a late afternoon. The air was still damp, scented with pine and the faint smoke of the fireplace inside. Cassian stepped out first, the weight of his coat hanging heavy on his shoulders. Behind him, Alina emerged, her hand instinctively reaching for Noah's. Noah's eyes lit up before he even saw the building. It was the way Cassian looked at him, like a secret was about to be told. "Come on," Cassian murmured, the corners of his mouth lifting just enough to hint at the surprise. They entered through the east hall. The sound of their footsteps echoed in the polished marble corridor. It smelled faintly of varnish, the scent of something new, something finished, just days ago. Sunlight streamed through tall arched windows, scattering across the floor in golden shards. "This way," Cassian said quietly, guiding them to a set of double doors at the far end. Alina noticed how his hand rested on the brass handle a moment, longer than necessary, as if grounding himself. Then, with a slow push, the doors opened. The first thing they saw was the library. Floor-tisseling shelves lined in rich mahogany, already filled with books, leather-bound classics, glossy photography collections, and Noah's favorite illustrated novels. A rolling ladder leaned against one wall, the kind that could slide. Along the length of the room, the air was warm here, touched by the faint spice of old paper and the crispness of new pages. Noah's mouth fell open. "This is ours." Cassian nodded, his gaze softening. "Every story you want to live in, every place you want to go, it starts here." Beyond the library, another doorway led into the music room. A grand piano sat beneath a chandelier of crystal and brass, its surface catching the fading sunlight. Along one wall stood a row of instruments, a cello, a violin, even a small drum kit. In the corner, a worn guitar rested on its stand, the one Alina remembered from Cassian's younger days. "This is for you too," Cassian told Noah, "for whatever you decide you love. Reading, music, anything. It's yours to explore." Alina stayed quiet, watching them. She traced her fingertips along the smooth curve of the piano, the silk of her scarf brushing against her wrist. For a moment, she let herself take in the space, the quiet luxury of it. Yes, but also the thought behind it. This wasn't just a wing in a house. It was a promise made visible. They moved toward the far wall. There, between the library and the music room, hung a plaque. It gleamed softly in the afternoon light. The engraving, simple but deliberate, Noah Hart, below his name, a single line, "For the dreams you have yet to imagine." Noah stepped closer, his small hands pressed together, as if afraid to touch it. "Why my name?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Cassian knelt beside him, his own reflection caught in the polished brass. "Because you're part of this," he said. "Part of me. Part of what this place will always stand for." Elena's throat tightened. She wanted to speak, to thank him, to tell him what this meant. But her voice stayed caught in her chest, tangled in all the words she'd once thought she'd never say to him again. Cassian stood and turned to them both. "We don't erase what we were," he said quietly, his voice carrying that steady, unshakable tone she'd learned to recognize. "But we choose what we become." Outside, the last light of day began to fade. The rain clouds had broken apart, revealing a stretch of pale sky. The sound of the fountain in the courtyard drifted through the open window, a soft, constant hush. Noah wandered toward the shelves again, already pulling out a book. Alina stayed where she was, her eyes still on Cassian. There was no grand reconciliation here, no sudden absolution, but there was something else, something stronger, a quiet, living truce. Cassian moved toward the window, his silhouette framed in the fading light. For a moment, he looked almost like the man she had first met, ambitious, certain, untouchable. But there was more now. The sharp edges had been tempered, replaced by something harder to define. Alina stepped beside him. The glass was cool under her fingertips, and she could see the gardens stretching out into the distance. Somewhere in the quiet, she heard Noah laughing softly at whatever he'd found in the book. Cassian didn't look at her when he spoke again. "This is just the start," he said. "For him, for us, if you'll let it be." Her chest ached with the weight of it, not because it was perfect, nothing between them ever would be, but because it was real. The last of the sunlight slipped below the horizon, leaving the room in the warm glow of lamplight. In the silence that followed, Alina found herself breathing easier than she had in years. And in that final room, with the library to her left and the music room to her right, she realized some endings aren't meant to close a story, they're meant to open a new one. The golden lights of the ballroom shimmered like liquid sunlight, spilling over marble floors and silk drapes. Soft laughter floated through the air, mingling with the gentle hum of music. Crystal glasses clinked, and the scent of roses, deep, velvety, and intoxicating, lingered in every breath. At the far end of the hall, a photographer adjusted his lens. His gaze kept drifting toward the trio near the grand staircase. Cassian in a perfectly tailored suit, Alina in an emerald gown that caught the light with every turn, and Noah, beaming with a shy pride that was impossible to hide. They didn't pose like people trying to look perfect. They stood like people who had already lived through the worst storms and survived them together. Cassian's arm rested lightly on Elena's back, not as possession, but as a silent promise. Noah's small hand was wrapped around hers, as if anchoring them both. The camera's flash burst a brief, brilliant star. In that instant, the world seemed to hold its breath. Later, when the evening was fading into memory, Elena found herself in the quiet corridor of the estate, walking past a row of framed photographs, portraits of noble guests, dignitaries, and moments Cassian had deemed worth preserving, and there, in the newest frame, was their photograph. The golden light wrapped around them like a crown. Cassian's eyes held something softer than pride. Noah's smile glowed brighter than any chandelier, and she, once the woman who had scrubbed these same floors while the world passed her by, stood at the very center, her presence undeniable. Her fingers hovered over the glass, tracing the outline of their faces. She remembered the sting of past whispers, the way her name was often left unspoken, the way she had once been told she didn't belong in these rooms. Now, the proof was here, in silver and paper and light. No one would dare call her just a cleaning lady again. And for the first time in years, Alina realized she didn't need them to say it. The photograph said everything for her. The ballroom was empty now, stripped of its earlier grandeur. The chandeliers still glowed faintly overhead, their golden light catching the edges of the polished floor. But the music, the laughter, the clinking of glasses, all of it had faded into silence. Alina stood near the far wall, her fingertips grazing the velvet curtain, as though grounding herself in its texture. The air was heavy, but not suffocating, more like the stillness after a long, relentless storm. Cassian entered quietly, his footsteps muted against the floor. He had taken off his jacket, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his tie hanging loose. He looked less like the man who had been the center of every whispered conversation tonight, and more like the man she had once found sitting on the kitchen floor of his penthouse, glass in hand, eyes hollow. "Everyone's gone," he said softly. "Just us now." She turned to face him. Her eyes were clear, but there was a weight in them, the kind that came from carrying something too long. "I didn't think I'd ever tell you," she began, her voice even but threaded with a quiet tremor. "Not because I wanted to hide it forever, but because I thought it would destroy everything." Cassian's expression didn't change, but something in him stilled completely. He knew, or maybe he had always known, deep down, that there was something unspoken between them, a piece of her life she kept locked away. Alina stepped forward, her hands clasped in front of her, as though holding the truth itself. "When I came here, when I took that job, it wasn't only because I needed the money. It was because I was running from what I did, from what I lost." Her words seemed to echo in the empty room. "I thought if I worked quietly, kept my head down, I could disappear. No one would ask questions, no one would see me. But you," her voice faltered, "not because of fear now, but because of memory. You saw me anyway, even when I didn't want to be seen." Cassian moved closer, his eyes fixed on hers, and now, her breath caught. "Now I know that telling you won't ruin us, because what I was so afraid to say is the very thing that made us what we are." It wasn't a confession laced with scandal or betrayal. It wasn't meant to shock him. It was simply the truth that she had loved once before and lost more than she thought she could survive. That she had been broken long before he was. That the walls between them had been built not out of distrust, but out of fear of losing someone again. And yet, here they were. Cassian reached for her hands, his grip firm but warm. "Alina, not every storm destroys." She looked at him then, really looked at the man who had fought his own darkness and still chosen to reach for her. "Some storms clear the way," he continued, "and I think yours brought you here." The silence between them now wasn't heavy. It was full of understanding, of acceptance, of the knowledge that sometimes the most fragile truths are also the strongest. Alina felt something shift inside her, like the final lock turning in a door she had been afraid to open. She realized that her story, the one she had been so desperate to hide, wasn't a weakness. It was a testament to survival, and it was that very survival that had made her capable of standing beside him now. Cassian pulled her closer, his forehead resting lightly against hers. "You saved me without even knowing it," he whispered. "So maybe it's time you stopped thinking of yourself as someone who needed saving." Her lips curved into a faint smile, not of triumph, but of quiet peace. Later, as they walked through the now silent estate, the moonlight spilling through tall windows, Alina glanced toward the framed photograph, taken just hours earlier at the Gala, Cashin's arm around her. Noah standing in front of them, grinning with a mischief that promised 100 more late-night kitchen raids. Once, she had been invisible. Now, she stood at the center of something unshakable, and for the first time in years, she didn't fear the next storm, because she knew now, sometimes the thing you believe will break you, will instead become the reason you rise. As they reached the grand staircase, Cassian squeezed her hand gently, his voice low but steady. "Let's go home," he said. For Alina, home was no longer a place she ran to escape the past. It was here, with him, with Noah, with the life they had built, not in spite of their scars, but because of them. The secret had shattered once, but in the breaking, it had remade everything. And sometimes, the quietest woman holds the loudest truth.